Hi everyone, I'm Alex Smith. I'm the lead engineer and co-founder of Handy Software. Today we're going to be talking about our new piece of software called HandyHost. HandyHost basically lets you rent out a lot of your assets on your current technology stacks or new technology stacks over utility blockchains. Specifically, we're focusing on 4 projects that we're going to be allowing you to host. First of all is DVPN Sentinel, and as the token name DVPN suggests, it's decentralized VPN. So essentially you're bandwidth mining, you're providing your bandwidth in exchange for tokens. And coupled with that, DVPN also resolves the handshake blockchain, TLDs. And we're big handshake fans, the first handshake miners, winners of the first blocks, huge handshake fans, so which is why we got involved with this exciting project. Second of all is Saya Coin. Saya, you can think of it like renting out your extra disk space for tokens. And specifically, you could think of it like an Amazon S3, but you, instead of a data center being the provider of the storage, it's you. And third on the list, and specifically what we're going to be going through today, is Akash. Akash is really exciting. It's actually, kind of like similar to an Amazon EC2, so you can rent out servers. And specifically, we're going to be building a cluster today, and a cluster is just a group of nodes or computers, small computers, that they do a lot of the work for us in terms of the hosting, and we do very little to manage them thanks to HandyHost. So this is what an Akash host looks like. It's very small, as you can see, and it's got a ton of ports on it. It's got Ethernet, the important things. But as well, if you wanted to attach a ton more disk storage, there's a SATA 3 port and mounting holes on the bottom, so you can actually just slide a standard disk in here and mount it up and get it ready to go. And very small, pretty cost efficient. I think I spend about $550 per machine to make. It takes 3 of them for a cluster. And overall, I'm really happy with it. And you're asking yourself probably, why don't I just spin up my Raspberry Pis? Well, we thought the same thing. We made an initial dev cluster with Raspberry Pi 4s. It was a beautiful thing, and we got everything done, everything integrated, and then found out that Akash doesn't support ARM processors, the CPUs inside of Raspberry Pis just yet. Later on, we'll have that build, but for now, we've got these really powerful machines, and these are a lot more beefy than your standard Raspberry Pi 4. It has a 4-core CPU built onto the board, so you don't need to assemble anything, really. And it's got 8 threads as well, so as far as Kubernetes, which is our kind of cluster manager, sees it, we have 8 CPUs to deal with. And you can also add up to 32 gigs of RAM. And in our case, we had an NVMe SSD drive, 512 gigs, so you get super fast storage for anybody who's renting your hosts. So today we're going to go ahead and build one of these. And then in our next video, if you stick around, we're going to show you how to use HandyHost to set up your whole cluster. One of the things that we're doing with HandyHost, our core goal here is to make things easy. We don't expect you to hop onto a command line or be a professional developer just to set up a cluster. Anybody should be able to do this. And with our software, you just have to click in a few places and never hit a command line, and everything just works. Let's get started with our build. These are all the components we need. It's actually not very much. Within the box, we've got our U-Do bolt and a few of the accessories you're going to need. A couple of screwdrivers, just Phillips heads. Make sure to have one that's magnetic. That'll come in really handy getting in some tight corners when we install the motherboard into the case. The only two pieces of hardware we need here, which is great, we've got our NVMe B-key drive. I'll drop a link. I picked these up on eBay for about 60 bucks a piece. But yeah, 512 gigs, really, really fast transfer speeds to the CPU, so people will get some great quality of service when they rent your host. And next, memory. RAM is essential. This is 260 pin. It has to be 2400 megahertz. That's key. And I got these on Amazon for about 35 bucks a pop. This is an 8 gig stick. We're only going to use one in this build, but since I have technically 4 CPUs, I usually go with about 2 gigs of RAM per CPU. But you can add more too. The beauty is that the machine takes 2 sticks. So you could have, 8 gig sticks, 16 gig sticks, whatever you want. But any of this can be upgraded at any time. So we're just kind of starting small with a 512 gig SSD and an 8 gig stick of RAM. The next things that you're going to need, which hopefully are pretty obvious, an Ethernet port. You can get any. This one I got off Amazon for like $30. You can find them cheaper. And some Cat6 Ethernet cables. This is like a 6-inch cable. I like to keep cables short. Don't get the 7-footers. I mean, you'll have the machines next to each other, so you'll just have some cable mess. So get between 6 and 12 inches, maybe a little mix of both. So let's get unboxing here. So this is the packaging. It's really pretty. Really love the unboxing experience here. So inside the package, we've got both US and 220 European cables. That'll come in really handy if you're not in the US. Charger brick. And then the important part, we've got our case. And inside of the case, inside of the little sled, secured into place with a couple of screws, which we'll take out. But inside of here is our power button, any of the other screws we need, and so forth. And the most important part of all, we've got our motherboard. And below this, there's a Wi-Fi adapter, but we're not going to do this. Don't install the Wi-Fi on this. Don't be serving content over Wi-Fi. You need a strong, reliable connection, and Wi-Fi is not that for hosting websites, apps, databases. You don't know what they're going to rent from you, but it's going to be mission critical. So just use your wired connections. So let's unwrap this. And it's a really beautiful board, really compact. As I mentioned, CPU's already installed, so no busting out the CPU grease and orienting CPUs. No stress there for anyone who doesn't like to build CPUs. This is a really easy build. Everything's already wired up. We see our 2 slots for our RAM sticks, and then on the bottom side, there's a bunch of M2s. I think you can do, let's see, this one, little guys for the Wi-Fi. You can also install an SSD, supplementary SSD on this M2. And then this specific one, the long one, is going to be the one that we're using for our NVMe drive. So first things first, let's start by putting our RAM in here. The key thing about RAM is we need to hear it click into place. And these little keys will kind of click down once it's there. And really, you can't mess this up. If you notice, we've kind of got this key slot right, let's say 58% down the middle. You can't put this in backwards. It's physically impossible, which is really exciting because you literally can't mess this up. Because you see, this doesn't match up, but hey, look, the slot matches up with the slot in the, in the RAM physical slot sled. So we'll get it all oriented. There we go. And we're going to push down on it. You got to push kind of firm, and what's going to happen, we'll hear an audible click, and these 2 little tabs on the side will snap into place. There we go. Click, click. And if you see, the 2 tabs are now firmly into place on the side of the RAM stick, and it's done. We can put the others into place because we're not going to use them. So now let's install our NVMe storage. First we take this screw out. The screw is going to be used to kind of secure the stick into place once it's finally in its home. And yeah, there's, again, no way you can mess this up. There's a little key, it's called the B key. You could imagine a letter B there, but there's only one way to put this in the slot. And it slides into place. The important thing here, it won't click audibly, but you'll notice that it kind of flips upward at an angle, and we don't see any gold here where the key, where it's slid into place. That means it's home. And as well, you notice there's a little ellipse or elliptical thing there, and it's perfectly aligned so that we can pop in our screw and secure the NVMe drive into place. That's it. That's all the hardware we're going to have to do. Really exciting, right? So now let's put this little fella into its final home inside our case. So like I mentioned, there's 2 screws. Sometimes they're on opposite corners that are always holding this into place. When it finally gets into its home, there's 1 on each corner, but they ship it with 2 screws just kind of holding the thing into place, so it doesn't just bang all around and scratch everything. I'm thankful for that. One of the things I recommend, my desk has a little slant to it, so I keep the memory stick package. It's got a little cup for the memory, but it comes in pretty handy when we dump out a bunch of screws here, because in a moment we'll have a whole bag of screws that we're pulling out. And as you can see, the sled just comes right out. And inside of that, we've got all of our gear that we need to install. And it's not very much. It's really just like 2, maybe 3 pieces, and they're all pretty trivial. So the biggest important one is our power button. And here on our case, we see we've got a little hole for that. And the bolt that holds the power button is already kind of screwed on, so we're just going to unscrew that and slip our red and black wires through the hole, slip the power button through, and then on the underside of this we will thread our bolt back over the wires and back onto the button and secure it in place. And you don't need to bust out any pliers here, just finger tight is fine. It's not going to go anywhere. Alright, the button is secured. The big thing that we need to do here, you see there's this lightning bolt on the top of the case. An LED is going to shine through from the motherboard and up through this little peg. It looks like an old school light bright peg, and it'll illuminate that lightning bolt. Now the key part here, you notice in our sled we've got this little hole where it lives at. The long end of that needs to go down. So there's kind of a, where there's a stopper at it, there's a long end and a short end. Long end goes down. And then we've got a little clear rubber O-ring, and that is going to slide around the that long end. You kind of got to really bend your fingers to get it in there pretty well. There we go. And then just secure that into place. It doesn't have to be perfect, but very little room for wiggle there. So now that is there, we're going to go ahead and put it in our motherboard. So it's going to be a really tight fit when you try to fit your motherboard into the case. It's really kind of a little bit magic, a little bit art, a little bit science. But you can basically get it in an angle. You see the Ethernet port and the HDMI ports. Angle those in first, kind of under the LED, and you can really align them with kind of their final resting home on the case itself. And then when they kind of are into place and start to poke through, just give it a little push on the other side and it all falls right into place. Like I said, it's a really tight fit, probably the biggest pain of the process. Alright, so next step in the process is we're going to want to screw in the motherboard. And there's 4 screws, 3 are in the corners, and 1 is kind of in the 4th corner. It can't be in that corner, so it's just a little bit further down in the corner. And the key thing that I recommend having here is a magnetic screwdriver, because you're going to drop a screw and it's really painful to fish it out. Done it way too many times now, and so yeah, that's the one thing that's going to be pretty handy. Again, not required, but it'll save you a little bit of headache. And so I'm just going to actually zoom through on fast motion here because I don't want to bore you with me dropping screws. So let's go ahead and do that. So now, our final step, we need to slide the computer into its final home. And so how the orientation works here, see there's these 10 pins, technically 9 right there. That's going to go right underneath our power button. And you kind of have to angle angle it in to get around that power button, but once it's there, then it just finishes sliding in. Before we get it into its final resting place, we need to plug in the fan. There's a black and a red. As I mentioned, there's those 9 pins, right? So there's one pin that's missing in this corner, and our black goes right next to that missing pin on the same row of 5 pins, and the red goes next to the black on that same row of 5 pins. So yeah, that's the key thing. There's a missing pin, and black goes next to the missing pin, and then further on that same row of 5 pins, red goes next to the black. And then you can finish sliding it in, just tuck the cables into place. We're ready to go. Then you can just turn it on the side and orient this up to the top, and you can see the screw holes from there. And there's 4 tiny flathead screws, technically 6. You can choose whichever ones you want out of that 6. That will hold everything into place. Okay, now we're all assembled. The only last part here, you'll have 4 little rubber feet. I already put mine on, unfortunately, but you just stick them anywhere you want near the 4 corners, and they're just 3M adhesive rubber feet. And like I said, this does accommodate another storage drive. That's what all these other screws that it comes with are for. So if you get another drive, you could get like a 10 terabyte SATA 3 spinning disk for something like Siacoin, and actually you could get a 4th one of these and run this as your Sia, HandyHost master node. So you'd be running DVPN, Siacoin, and as well, the cache provider that controls the other 3 nodes that you're going to be hosting out. It's way cheaper than I'll show you in the next video, but I have a really big machine that has like 20 terabytes of storage on it. That's great, but you could also get another 10 terabyte disk and put it in this for still cheaper than the bigger machine. So tune in next time, and we will talk about setting up our Akash cluster. One of the key things about HandyHost, like I said, we want to make this easy for you, so you literally don't have to touch a line of code. You just kind of plug in a thumb drive and start flashing the operating system onto these, and they'll all be pre-configured and ready to go and ready to host. So tune in next time, and we'll show you all of that workflow. Thanks.